This is Pulse of Africa, the face of Ethiopia, the voice of Africa.
Hello viewers, you're watching Pulse of Africa. I'm Samia Mohammed for the main news. First, our top stories for today. Guinea-Bissau to hold presidential and legislative elections in November 2025. Nigeria to expand transmission capacity by 1,500 megawatts by 2026. Canada launched its first African strategy. EU ministers to discuss joint borrowing for defense. Now, the news in detail. President of Guinea-Bissau, Umaro Sissoco Embalo, announced on Friday that he has issued a decree setting November 23, 2025 as the date for presidential and legislative election in the West African country. The decision was made following consultations with the government, political parties, and the National Electoral Commission, according to the presidential decree. Under Guinea-Bissau's constitution, the presidential term is set at 5 years, with the possibility of one renewal. Speaking to reporters at the Osvaldo Vieira International Airport upon his return from visits to Russia, Azerbaijan, and Hungary last week, Embalo confirmed his intention to seek a second term in the upcoming elections. Now to South Sudan. The outgoing chairperson of the African Union Commission, Musa Faki Mohammed, called for an immediate end to hostilities in South Sudan. Faki particularly expressed deep concern over the escalating tensions and clashes in Nasir County in Upper Nile State that included a lethal attack on a UN helicopter and violence in western Equatoria and western Bahr el-Ghazal, threatening the peace process. He strongly condemns this violent escalation and calls for utmost restraint by all parties. He calls on the authorities to hold the perpetrators of the violence fully accountable and to take prompt measures to protect citizens. The chairperson calls for an immediate end to the hostilities, adherence to the ceasefire arrangements, and for the parties to urgently engage in national dialogue. In this regard, the African Union Commission is currently consulting with the authorities, IGAD, and other stakeholders on common actions to de-escalation of the situation. Moving on to Angola. Angola's capital, Luanda, is set to host the 17th U.S.-Africa Business Summit from June 22 to June 25, 2025, bringing together over 1,500 delegates, including African leaders, U.S. government officials, and executives from both U.S. and African companies. This summit aims to strengthen trade, investment, and business relations between the U.S. and Africa. It will serve as a key platform for discussions on expanding U.S.-Africa business collaboration across various sectors, including energy, infrastructure, agriculture, technology, manufacturing, and health. The U.S.-Africa Business Summit is recognized as one of the most important business platforms that annually bring together African heads of state and key ministers, U.S. cabinet officials, and head of major agencies and CEOs and senior executives of U.S. and African companies to foster investment, trade, and commercial collaboration. Shifting to Canada. Canada announced the launch of its first global strategy for Africa, which calls for partnership for shared prosperity and security. According to the statement, Canada's Africa strategy represents a robust new foreign policy designed to benefit Canadian and African partners, thus contributing to Canada and Africa's collective economic prosperity, as well as to global health, peace, and security. Canada's Africa strategy was developed over a 2-year period through extensive consultations with Canadian and international stakeholders and African partners and stakeholders, it was indicated. This will guide Canada's work with African partners by increasing mutually beneficial economic opportunities, including through job creation, infrastructure, development, and sustainable economic growth. The new strategy also envisions partnering with Africa to maintain peace and security and advance shared priorities internationally to address global challenges and mutual interests, including climate change. European Union finance ministers will discuss on Monday how to pay for defense through new joint borrowing, existing EU funds, and a greater role for the European Investment Bank with a view to decisions in June, the Polish EU presidency said. In an invitation letter to the ministers, Andrzej Domanski, the finance minister of Poland, which chairs EU meetings, said the talks would follow up on decisions by EU leaders last Thursday to explore the sources of financing. Given the rapidly evolving security landscape, Europe must reflect deeply on the future of defense spending, Domanski said in the letter. A stable and predictable funding framework is essential to systematically develop European defense capabilities, he said. The ministers will work on European Commission proposal for the EU to raise 150 billion euros against the security of the EU budget for loans to governments for defense projects. Moving on to our next story. Argentina announced 3 days of national mourning late Sunday after authorities raised the days toll for recent flash flooding to 16, with more still missing. The deadly flood struck Friday when a year's worth of rain fell in a matter of hours in and around Bahia Blanca, a major port city located in the south of Buenos Aires province, with entire neighborhoods inundated by the fast-rising waters. The Latin American nation has been particularly shaken by tragic reports of 2 girls aged 1 and 5 being swept away in the torrent. Bahia Blanca Mayor Federico Subieles, meanwhile, told press conference that the flooding had caused $400 million in infrastructure damage. The storm left much of the surrounding coastal area without power. At one point, city officials in Bahia Blanca suspended electricity due to the huge amount of water in the streets.
Only on the Pulse of Africa channel, all the time. Pulse of Africa, the face of Ethiopia, the voice of Africa.
Now, turning to business news. Nigeria has increased its power transmission capacity by over 80% to 8,500 megawatts in the past 2 years and plans to add another 1,500 megawatts by the end of 2026, a government official announced. This expansion aims to tackle persistent transmission bottlenecks, reduce power outage, and enhance electricity supply nationwide, supporting industrial growth and improving living standards. Nigeria is investing in grid infrastructure, generation, and distribution to improve efficiency and minimize energy loss. Strengthening the grid will not only boost domestic power supply, but also position Nigeria as a key player in regional energy solutions. These initiatives underscores the country's commitment to sustainable development and economic progress by addressing its long-standing electricity challenges. Finally, global food prices increased in February, driven by rising energy and transport costs, as well as unfavorable weather conditions, the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization reported Friday. The Food and Agriculture Organization Food Price Index rose 1.6% compared to January and was 8.2% higher than a year earlier. Dairy, vegetable oils, and sugar saw the largest price increase in February, while grain and cereal prices, the index's largest component, rose slightly and meat prices declined. Dairy prices climbed 4.0% from January, driven by increased global demand. Vegetable oil price index rose 2.0% in February, pushing the index to 29.1% above its year-ago level. Sugar recorded the sharpest monthly increase, rising 6.6%. Prices for grains and cereals saw modest gains, rising 0.7%. Before concluding, let us provide you with the latest updates on global commodity prices. That's all for today. Thank you for watching The Pulse of Africa.
This is Pulse of Africa, the face of Ethiopia, the voice of Africa.